Hello, everyone, and welcome this afternoon, evening, and in case it's morning, anybody else joining from non-India or non-Southeast Asia. I'm Joy Abdullah. I'm in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, and it's a pleasure to be here. So we'll be talking about simplifying marketing using 5 Ws and 1 H, and I'll get into that in detail. The second point, please feel free to put your questions in, and I'll pick them up at the end of the session. This is going to take about 30-35 minutes. And feel free to ask anything. And as we walk through the talk, I hope I'll be able to provide some insights on how you can simplify your marketing strategy. Sit back, enjoy, shoot out your questions, and look forward to an interactive session after the talk. So here we are. I'm going to talk about simplifying marketing strategy and what exactly happens given where marketing is. Why this topic to start the sessions that we are going to have? For many of you in marketing and those of you who are associated but not directly in the marketing function, marketing's become an extremely overwhelming discipline from my perspective. And I work in B2B marketing with my clients. I run a strategy marketing consulting business. So one of the things that I see very constantly happening is that getting into developing the marketing strategy, the discussions tend to become either very tactical or they tend to become very sales promotion, if I may use that term. And one of the things that drops in this scenario is actually creating a roadmap or creating a pathway for the brand to execute. And that pathway basically means you create a road and then you decide along the way what are the stops, what are the details that you need, because that whole journey, known commonly as the customer journey, the buyer journey, is all about an experience. So the purpose of this topic is to give you something, these tools of 5 Ws and 1 H, which is actually ancient and classic. I'm bringing it back to help you at a pre-strategy stage to get your framework, get your terrain. Where are you going to build the road? How are you going to build the road? What are you going to use? How long will the road be? How wide will it be? That kind of analogy, if it helps, to understand what you need to do in creating your marketing strategy. So from my aspect, to my clients and to people, I always bring out one bit about marketing. The end objective of any marketing activity, individually or as a sum of all the activities, it's about making people feel good about the brand. It's not about positioning the brand in the mind. All of that is gone, done. There's a lot of cacophony, there's a lot of noise. So if your brand needs to stand out, especially today, 20 months into the pandemic and coming out, the world has changed from a behavior aspect. And what's important is for a brand to have emotional resonance. And that emotional resonance, I sum it up in 2 words. How can I make my prospect, my customer, my user feel good? And let me explain that as we go along. You see, it's all about people. If you pull back, pause, and ask yourselves these questions. Why am I in business? Yeah, sure. The immediate answer is to make a profit. That's great. But that process of making profit happens between people. What am I doing in marketing? I'm communicating my brand, telling its advantages and the solution it brings to somebody's need. So it goes back to this whole story of all being about people. And people, please remember, they're like you and I. And here's where there's a commonality amongst 7.5 billion of us. All of us as people, we have ants in our head. Yeah, you heard that right. And you read that right. Ants, A-N-T-S, literally crawling through our heads. And these ants are actually thoughts, an average of 12 to 60,000 a day of 24 hours, even when we are sleeping. And this has an impact. This has a huge impact on marketing. These are automatic negative thoughts. And the numbers are there for you to see. throughout the day, 80% of our thoughts are actually negative thought. It's how our brain is wired. And I'll get into psychological areas, but it's basically freeze flight syndrome kind of scenario in our brain that makes us have self-doubts and creates these negative thoughts. And a whole lot of these negative thoughts, 95% data-wise, are repetitive thoughts. Now hold this. This is very important when you're building your marketing strategy, because you're talking to people and people have this in their head. Now imagine how whatever you're going to be marketing and using in your communication, how your audience is filtering this out. Put yourself as a consumer right now, and you'll be able to observe. If you observe your brain, if you step back, pause and look, everything that's happening because of our dependency on social media, on the mobile phones, on technology, we are constantly bombarded from the moment we open our eyes, for those of us who have this bad habit of looking at our phones the first thing in the morning, till closing our eyes and going to sleep at night. And in that process, the brain can only process a certain amount of data, and it has auto filtering. And that's the block that your marketing has to overcome. What does this do? This is what happens. It actually makes it critical for marketing to achieve these three objectives. You've got to emotionally connect. Your language has to be inclusive. And this is a bit of a jargon, but to simplify it, inclusive means your talk is not corporate BS. It has to be common layman's lingo, spoken and understood by your prospect and your customer and your audience. And lastly, most importantly, your content, it has to create engagement by using persuasion technique. It's not about active verbs and passive words and active words and all of that. That's there. That's a given. But it's a level above where you've got to use persuasion techniques in the visualizations and in the words that you use to connect emotionally and to persuade, to impact, create influence. What this does, if you keep this framework in mind and you move into creating your strategy and your content aspect, you've got to invest time and effort. It doesn't happen on the fly. Honestly, great marketing is not something that happens on the fly. There's a whole storyline and a whole set of data about going viral, very different from great marketing. Great marketing stands the test of time, and there are thousands of brands you can pick up and look at it. What this investment of time and effort does, and I'll spend a bit more time on this next week when we talk about purpose and value, is that it directly gives you three key KPIs: leads, sales, and revenue. Now, pre-strategy stage, where do you focus your time? As I said, focus your time on purpose, the why, and it's not about making profit. A couple of the questions are here, and we'll discuss this in detail next week. And then on value. And value is not a price value. That's the common mistake that a lot of us tend to make. Price has nothing to do with it. Value has three levels: emotional, functional, and then financial. So the value, the emotional value, carries a 65% weight, if I were to put it in this framework. Once you identify that value, having arrived at understanding what's the purpose that connects with the customer, there is a behavioral value that has to be aligned. That's where you focus your time, because this is your foundation. This is the plinth on which you'll build your brand house. What this does is it makes your marketing strategy extremely agile. Agile, not from the tech perspective, but agile for adapting and adjusting. And this is where the classic 5 W's and 1 H comes into play. I'm sure you're aware of this: who, what, when, why, where, and how. The who, focus not on demographics. Focus on first understanding the 20% of your audience that's going to be 80% of your revenue generator. Define that ideal person from behavior perspective. And for this, you need data from a social listening perspective. You need data from where they're located. There is a difference city-wise, state-wise, country-wise, according to the customers where they are. And there's also a difference in time period. Customers' mindset changes daily. So you got to really get a kaleidoscope of behavior perspective from where's the customer spending a lot of time, a prospect. Is it on Facebook? Is it on Twitter? There's two different behavior patterns you're going to get. And then what you try and distill or get the insight out is, what are they looking for? What does this feel good that they want? So social media, social listening will give you some areas where you will be able to understand what's the dopamine hit that they want. At the same time, and especially in B2B areas, you'll be able to understand what is this professional at that level, this designation seeking. What are they looking for? You need this, and it's available, it's doable, it's foundable to define who your customers are, because this will impact directly on the tonality of your content and the channel of your content. Then you answer your why. This will be connected back to your purpose and to the value that you've discovered. How do you align it? And how does that bit come out? And this is where you bring storytelling into play. What? Identify the exact short-term, long-term. What is the gratification they need today? What are they seeking? And what's the benefit of that gratification over a longer term? So play for the long-term solution. Again, I repeat, great marketing, a real solid marketing strategy is not one that is looking at a 90-day numbers deliverable. That's a different exercise. You're looking at a 365 4-quarter deliverable on brand building KPIs, and this plays right in there. What is the pain that gives them a long-term solution? Because you want the customer to have repeat purchase, to refer to you. That's the what that needs to be answered. A lot of us miss this out. We do it by channel, but it's very important to actually prioritize the time of day of communication. And again, if y'all are using email marketing, it's really very helpful to have a time understood when they prefer to have that email being sent out, so it doesn't get stuck with a bunch of other emails, or when you're doing, messaging communication using mobile messaging through WhatsApp or Telegram or instant messengers on Facebooks and other social media. Knowing the time of day to send them a clearly crafted short message is extremely critical for immediate attention. Where is, because we are living through social media, you need to prioritize which social media do you really invest in. So it's not taking 3 or 4 and going 25% on each, because you'll land up with 0. It's better to focus on 1 to 2 and really have a 70-30, 80-20 split between a preferred channel and a support channel. And the content then plays accordingly. Bring in the how. Bring in the 1H, and the how from the 5 W's is actually the execution plan. I label it as TAPS, tactical action plans, because each of these areas will have an execution plan. Tactical content by channel, by client segment, by content themes. That's a series of plans. Social media, preference of channel, what, when, where, and how, again, comes into play. Website, where does each content piece land? It's not on a common landing page, by the way. You need to use different sections of your website for different segments of your customers to come and land on. Has to be the purpose of that messaging, the marketing is going to be to bring them to a central point from where they can get the information that they need that solves their requirements. And finally, bring all of these together into monthly activity plans. For my clients, I do a fortnightly, because it's easier to work fortnightly, work through 7-8 days, and then amend, tweak for the second week while planning for week 3 and 4. So again, depending on the service that y'all are in and managing, you can craft the activity plans to be weekly or fortnightly, at the most monthly. not more than that. So what the tactical action plans then do is it ensures you've got a common look and feel. Your brand identity across touch points is solid, is standard. Second, it allows you to have a consistency in your frequency of content posting. And third, find out respective hashtags across channels. Hashtags are different, as we all know, across channels. And how can you latch onto those hashtags to gain visibility and at the same time create one unique brand hashtag within certain number of alphabets, not a very long one, preferably, which communicates certain benefit that will come out of your value and solution you're delivering. If you're with me this far, I'm just sharing a couple of bonus tips that I work and help my clients do, which is before you take your brand out, take your brand handle and identify some top content creators on specific channels that you're going to be on. Spend at least a week, 5 to 6 days prior to putting out brand content, engaging in intelligent, thank you, that's a great share, but action there or how it helps you, anything on that content creator. What this does is the content creators themselves plus the people following the content creators will actually come into your profile. So that starts increasing your brand's visibility. Now, this works, just a side note, it works whether you're doing it as a personal brand, as a service brand, as an employer brand, or you're doing it as a corporate brand. This technique helps simply for your handle, your profile to get visibility. Now, in your profile, this is where point one, identity has to be consistent, core message has to be consistent across touch points. The second bonus tip is something that I see a lot not happening. Segment your email database. That's a gold mine. You have email database. Whether you say you don't have, you have. So just to digress for a minute, I worked with a client who was an accounting and management services business in the Middle East, and I'm still working with them. And one of the things we started with last year when we started is, and I asked for an email database, and they said, Joy, we don't have an email database. 4 days later, talking to their key executives in charge of various functions, we had generated a database of over 800 email IDs. Then, of course, running the dedupes and checking and doing everything brought us to being able to have something like 600 odd, and we segmented those between current clients and people in client organizations and potential inquiries that had come in as in prospects, and we started. And today that database has climbed up about 10 months, 11 months, going to be 1 year in November, has climbed up to 1,200 fresh database that is constantly in touch with what my client is doing. So segment your database because of that point that is there on the second paragraph under segment database, which is it helps you to send the relevant content link on a relevant channel to that customer and create that visibility, create that recall. All right. So this really helps over long term because you're ensuring, especially in B2B, you're ensuring your brand is always top of mind. The more you get your brand remembered, the more you get your brand connected. When it comes to a renewal time of a contract or I want new services, you're the first go-to source in that buyer's head. I love this slide. Why should you do 5 Ws and 1 H? Simply because here's the CIA. Yep. It's not the Central Intelligence Agency, but for marketing, it really works that way. It gives you clarity from giving you focus and removing confusion that happens a lot, again, from my experience on internal roles. I've had this as a CMO working as a marketing director in my corporate career. I see this with my clients even today. But what this does, this pre-strategy stage of using 5 Ws is it helps the marketing team to focus who's doing what. Number one. Number two, focuses exactly where time should be spent and what are the key areas. So clarity comes in. When you have that clarity, You understand how to create the impact you want. What do you want your communication to do? What do you want your marketing to drive at by segment, by channel? And that brings forth brevity or crispness. A bit of advice: less is more. Remember, your customer has a short attention span and is bombarded. So if you can get the key essence of your message that's in your head as a brand communication over succinctly, boom, you've got impact. That's the second thing this format does. The third is a double A. Agility, I've spoken about that. It gives you the ability to adapt and change as per what's happening in the market and the feedback coming in. The other A is alignment. It helps you to align the tactics you're going to use to the strategy that you've created. So strategy will change. It's dynamic, but strategy does not change every week. Strategy would change on a quarterly basis, but tactics will change on a weekly basis, if necessary, even every 2 or 3 days, because you have to try a few things out. There is no 100% guarantee of a 10x X inquiry generation doing Y, at least not that I've been able to create so far. So here's the CIA benefit: clarity, impact, agility, alignment. Please remember this as I wrap this up and take your questions. Marketing today is not about selling, is not about shouting, is about getting your brand from the people's heads into their hearts. Brand is already in their heads. 1,000 brands are there. All your competitive brands are there. Everybody is in the head. The head is a logical, fact-based influencer. You keep talking facts, at a certain point, it just becomes white noise. But get them into the heart, and this is where the feel-good emotional connectivity comes in. Thank you for being a great audience, listening patiently. Let me get back on screen and let's see what are the questions that y'all are sending in. Question number 1, how would you go about building a content marketing team? Okay. Short answer, you need 3 key people in content marketing team. 1, a very good writer who has a tremendous grasp of the language. And I'm not talking only English, depending on the language you are doing. You need somebody who really understands the inside of language and especially understand what's being spoken on social as conversational language. 1. 2, you need a person who has futuristic ability where design is concerned and is able to understand what color spectrum triggers what emotions. Just a digression over here. For many who might not know, there is something called color logic. And if you know, please look it up, please study it. It's a short, this thing. Colors impact moods. Moods are emotions. Emotions impact thoughts and actions. So get the second one, which is a great person who is able to give you that identity from a visual perspective, is able to translate words into pictures. Remember the saying, the cliche, a picture speaks 1,000 words. So that's the second person. The third person you need is somebody who is a very efficient project manager. Now, this third person is key, is actually the hub. You see, creating the content, writing it or designing it is not difficult. You'll get the right resource. But ensuring the right content goes out in the right channel at the right time and is not killed by a new content immediately is where the project management person comes out. So have these 3 people. These 3 people are, you have to try few people, few services, social agencies to get them, and you'll have a content marketing team. If you're a marketing head and you don't have this in-house, my strong advice and recommendation would be to outsource and tie them up into a retainer for the year, because if you were to do it piecemeal with 20 pieces of content per channel per month, you're really going to hit your budget very badly. So that's question 1, how to go about building a content marketing team. 2, how do you decide your marketing budget? Yeah, good question. Good question. Let me tell you this. The thumb rule usually would be 10% of your revenue, which in many cases does not justify what you should invest. So put down what is your desired growth target from a financial dollar value, which means, do you want 100,000 to achieve in 12 months? So if it's 100,000, can you spend 10,000 in the communication, in your marketing? Now, when you're doing budget, there's two parts to a budget. One part is what you're going to spend, paid ads and fees. The other part is organic. Now, you've got to split in creating this budget, but usually it is based on an ROI of how much of revenue or of profit after tax we're going to generate, and each business has its own percentage over there. Happy to take this separately if you all need and have a session on this, but there's no thumb rule that is followed. There are industry thumb rules which after the pandemic have gone out of the window. Question number 3. Can you talk a little bit about performance marketing and what we need to be mindful of? Sure. Let me do this with Crater. Let me create a session on performance marketing because I will not be able to cover this in literally 5 minutes. There are a few areas, specific areas you need to be mindful of. So whoever's asked the question, thank you. Great question. I think we'll schedule this in November. Look forward to that. All right. I'm happy to share some tips on it. Number 4. Should you focus on brand building as an early stage company or first reach PMF? Brand building starts the day you conceive of your business idea. Start your brand first, not when you've got into the market, you've got a viable product, etc., etc. Your brand starts. It's like a baby being born. When a baby is conceived, the brand is already conceived, but the baby comes out 9 months later and then grows up after another 18 years or 20 years, and there's a nurturing process. So brand building is absolutely critical. I'm a proponent of brand building, and I always advise 70% of whatever you're spending, spend it on brand building, because brand building is long-term and it brings you long-term results. And again, I'll cover this in performance marketing, how it will work, but invest in brand building first and start it with your business idea. Even before you bought your website or something, start your brand, get your brand identity in place, your value proposition, what is the solution that is going to benefit, who your audience is, get all of that and start talking about it. Is traditional media still good for marketing? Oh yes, of course. Of course. Traditional media has been around. It's not going to die. Use it as a support. So there's a lot of influence that happens from news. Now we know news is negative and news is bad, but you can use not infomercial kind of advertorials, but use the brand to be spoken about in traditional media, whether it's television news or it's in newspaper news or magazine articles about the founders, the CEOs, senior people. The brand story is a whole story. It really helps. But the percentage weight of that media usage depends on which category of industry you're in. So for example, in the education sector, using traditional media would be very important, up to about 30%, simply because it's a cyclical, admissions required and all of that comes through the traditional media. Even when you put out on digital, you put out on social and lead them to the website, there is a requirement, because depending on the educational sector you're in, school or higher education or professional education, you have other decision influencers playing who use media differently. So if it's a school, parents are deciding. Parents, depending on the age group, you've got social media, you also need the traditional media. So that would be my advice. Use it, and for like accounting or healthcare, use it for the news value of the brand that can come out, right? Question 6, how do you segment your database other than where they are in the sales funnel? Well, in the sales funnel, segment it. Create your parameters depending on the industry you're in. And there's simple ways of creating those. Once you create it in the sales funnel and you get the database, create it by account, by certain behavior parameters that are applicable between you and your client business or your prospective business. So the email gets filtered there, and the content that you create for that segment, that behavior pattern with a particular theme goes to that email over there. Again, this is a very detailed area of how do you create segmentation. So do let us know. Happy to take another session on creating segmentation in terms of target marketing and communication backup. Seventh and the last question I'll take right now. So somebody is saying, I am building an offline consumer goods company. 80% of my sales are via vendors. Should I focus on online branding or marketing? Okay, number one, I'm not sure. I don't know in this question the level of consumer goods. Is it fast moving or is it durable? That's number one. If 80% of your sales are via vendors, you're using other support. Definitely, and I can't emphasize this more, make sure you have a brand campaign, a brand building marketing campaign of your brand running online across key social channels, tracking back to your website, talking about the benefit of your brand and the solution it gives to your audience, not about your vendors. Number one. Number two, involve your vendors to create and share their stories as part of what they do for your brand. They could be multiple brand distributors, but have them focus on something or create for them and write out. It works two ways. The vendor gets visibility. Target audience gets to know the brand and the vendor. So the relationship between you and the vendor as business owner and vendor gets stronger. Number one. Number two, it acts as a second level of support to your brand building campaign. People get more trust, more confidence that the company, the brand is advertising and is talking about this vendor also. So yes, short answer, please do have strong online brand building campaign. Thank you so much. I've taken these 7 questions. Please feel free to pop in your other solutions and suggestions for what you would like me to have. Thank you very much. Look forward to next Saturday. Do share your feedback. That will help me improve.